Welcome to the Work in Progress podcast. This is a space where we want to create conversations around things that actually matter. Thanks for joining us today. We hope these words encourage you to know that no matter where we are in our journeys, we're all still a work in progress. Hey, what's up, Work in Progress family?
We back.
We are back. And Daniel, I wanted to start this one off by asking you a question, bro.
All right, let's just go right into it.
How many followers do you even have?
Not that many, I don't think. I don't even know. 600 maybe.
Be real, man. Dude, that's more than me. That's double mine. I don't have very many followers. Anyways, we're talking about influencer today. How to be an influencer, not how to be an influencer.
How to be an influencer. That's right. Exactly.
We couldn't answer that question if that was the topic. So, but today's episode will be about the influence that we carry as individuals and pretty much like influencer culture.
That's good. No, that's really good. I was reading something the other day. The most common job that people want nowadays is influencer / YouTuber, right? Which is just influencer in video format.
Right.
Wow. I mean, who would have thought? I thought, I'm gonna date myself here, 8-9 years ago when I was teaching, when people would put the first day of school, it's like, hey, what do you want to be? I want to be an influencer. And I would always tell them what?
They did?
Yes, they would write that down. I want to be a YouTuber. I want to be an influencer. And you know what? I'm here to grant wishes because you know what?
Get out of here, bro.
We all are influencers. Let's go. Give yourself a round of applause. We are all influencers. Think about it.
Dude, I just hit 1 million followers.
No, you didn't. Hey, we all have influence.
Yeah.
Right? And so think about this. Instead of chasing after being an influencer, realize that you already are. I think when you begin to think about that, that kind of shifts the way that we think about things, right? You are an influencer. There is always, my dad used to tell me this, there is always somebody watching what you do. So here we go. Let's just dive right in. We all have influence. So how are you using that? How are you actually using your influence? Let's talk about social media to start. That's kind of where this conversation heads.
Yeah.
Tell me about this.
Anything.
Yeah. Tell me about you did some podcast work, you did some video work. That's what you do.
Yeah.
Tell me about how much influencing comes to mind. What do you think about it? Does it actually change how you do things? Tell me, how do you feel whenever you think about that?
Dude, so this is so interesting. I'm so wrapped up in that world, but also I'm not, right? I do work for people I do social media work for people. I make videos for them to post on their stuff. And I've been in this world for a few years now. And at the very beginning, I'd say 2-3 years ago when I first started, the goal was dude, I want to have the influence. I would love to be the person in front of the camera, not behind the camera. And I think this is my avenue to get in, right? Learn, get familiar with the technology and the fundamentals, and then I'll be able to make my own content, make my own stuff. And at the time, I really wanted to be a comedian, a stand-up comedian. And I kind of still that would be really cool. I would love to make people laugh for a living. But my priorities have shifted over the course of the last couple of years. And as my walk with Christ has gotten deeper and more, intimate. And so that's shifted completely. I don't feel that near as much anymore. I think the selfishness within that has gone away. And now my idea is how do I shift this to bring people to Christ, to shine light on him and not me. And I did actually have a podcast, as you mentioned earlier, and I was trying to build something where I would highlight other people's stories in their lives and their specialties and their talents. And it was really cool and awesome in the beginning. And then it got to the point where I wasn't having guests on.
Yeah.
And it was just me. And it just felt bad. It felt really bad to just be solo talking to the camera. And I had nothing bad to say, but also nothing of substance. I realized that I was just kind of talking just to fill that weekly post. And so it's interesting, man, because I've had a really major shifts in my perspectives when it comes to this. And I've had people reach out to me from my hometown and be like, dude, it really looks like you're living an awesome life. That's super cool. And when you hear that, you realize oh, this is this is crazy. This is wild because they really are, I guess they perceive me as this person that posts on Instagram and doing all these things that they might find cool or interesting. And in reality, I'm just like, not that guy. I'm like kind of a nobody, you know, like in a humble way, not in like I'm garbage, but like I'm nobody, you know? And so my perspective has been really interesting and unique. And I really think that I still would like to be one, but just not in the same way that it was when I first started.
I think that's kind of where you have to start this conversation is where is the motivation for wanting influence?
Right.
Like, where is that motivation, right? In Jeremiah, you have the scripture that says the heart is deceitful above all things, right? So if your heart's desire is for like fame and popularity because you want people to give you pats on the back and likes and all that stuff, right? Free goods. If that's your motivation, man, I pray that you don't become a influencer, right? But if your motivation for influencing others is so that you can share the gospel with them, man, I hope that you have an amazing platform. I hope that you are given a platform to speak to hundreds and thousands of people, because that's what we need. We need people who have that humble heart, who have that humble motivation to lead others to seek Christ. And so I think that's where you start. Like, what is your motivation? Yeah. What are you actually trying to achieve by having influence? And honestly, if you start there, I think you need to talk about the temptation that influence brings. That's right. So we're speaking through this lens of social media.
Right.
Right. And so influence can be a temptation. Right. And I think it's important to guard your heart. Again, like scripture says, guard your motivations, surround yourself with people who can speak into some of those things, right? Like if you know that your area of weakness is pride, man, you need to have people in your circle that are guarding you against some of those things that swell up when you get a certain number of likes or a certain number of shares or a certain number of follows or, you know,
right.
You need to have people that are in your circle and people that you trust, people that can speak the hard things to you and you not be offended or, you know, walk away from.
Yeah.
I think in the same mode of that is like when you are pressing into this influence, you need to have balance. We've talked, I think maybe in our first episode ever about creating margin in your life and having balance in your life. And I think that's part of this influence culture where we get so consumed by influencing others that there's no longer balance in our life.
Yeah.
And so I think those are a couple things to put out there.
Right.
And then I think the biggest question, and I've had to ask myself this, is are you okay with losing it all for the sake of Christ?
Right.
Like, are you okay with whatever following that you have or whatever platform that you've built? One day, if God decides, hey, I'm going to take it away, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Right. I think especially when you are a Christian, there's some things that you are going to believe that are direct opposition of what popular culture says, right? We could speak on a number of things that would be, direct opposition.
Absolutely.
To where you get canceled. Right. And so are you okay? Like, are you 100% okay with if God says, you know what, I need you to speak into this. I need you to stand strong in this truth, and you lose everything overnight.
Yeah.
Would you be okay? And so I think those are the questions you need to ask yourself when you begin to talk about influence, because if your identity is being shaped by this influence platform, I think that's where it becomes really, really dangerous. And so I think, I don't want to sound all doom and gloom, but I think it's important to start there. Like to start with like, hey, we need to have these guards up. We need to know these are the dangers of it, because it can be a slippery slope.
Yeah, it's definitely dangerous, man. Especially when the Becoming Something podcast with Jonathan Pokluda, he touches on this really, really well. And I was listening to that in preparation for this episode. And one of the things he says is that if you're being really honest with yourself, there's a desire in your heart to be worshiped, right? And that doesn't mean people falling on their knees and bowing down to you, but I think that includes this sphere of influence that recognition gives you through social media platforms or through whatever it may be, you know, YouTube, Instagram, whatever. Yeah. And you have to be honest, and like you said, you have to guard yourself from those things because it's not good. We're not meant to be worshipped. We were meant to worship the one and true, like, God, right? And so when that pressure and that, I don't even know, that weight is put upon your shoulders, of being worshiped, wanting that worship, it's not good. It's not good for your soul. And it's hard to balance that. And so I think one of the things I was thinking about with this is one thing that's kept me balanced. And it's not like I have, millions of followers or anything like that, but it's even with the little following that I have and the influence that I do have, because we all have influence, I find myself getting a big head sometimes. And so one thing that's really helped me level and balance that out is actively serving in the church. And you could serve anywhere, right? Like you could go feed the hungry. You can go do a number of things in your city, in your community to serve and volunteer. But one thing that we do on a monthly basis, I do it on a monthly basis, you do it way more often, is setting up and tearing down our church. Since we're a portable church, we're like on wheels, basically. We ran out of space. So literally every single Sunday, we're having to set everything up, from the screen that the lyrics are displayed on to where the kids play to, where the donuts and the coffee are stacked up on the tables. Everything is set up from scratch, and then everything is torn down at the very end. And this takes hours. It's not a short amount of time. And although it's not like back-breaking work, it is manual labor. And it humbles you to put yourself in position to where you're serving. You're getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. You're having to drive, and then you're staying until 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock after church, putting it away. So I think having things like that to balance you out, having people in your corner to balance you out is super important. And it's really easy to get a big head in something like this.
For sure. I actually remember having a conversation with somebody who is in a similar position that I am, works at a church, a little bit larger of a church, but I love the way that he does his Instagram. Like it just looks good. Like it's aesthetically pleasing. Yeah. And it's like, I was talking to him about like, man, how do you balance, like social media and using that platform for the gospel? And like, how do you not let it like get to you, good or bad? Like there's the highs and the lows. And he was just talking to me about, like, I want my social media platform to be the same person I am off as I am on. Mm-hmm. Right. And so he's like, I've got pictures of my family or food or shoes or whatever. I don't know, whatever he's into. And then I've got like scripture, and I've got thoughts or books or things that I've read. And he's like, it's just like you were talking to me in real life. Right. Of course, he's got this creativity, and so his looks good. It's aesthetically pleasing. But in his in his heart, like he's not doing it to get this all eyeballs on him. He's just doing it, one, because he enjoys it. Yeah. And two, like it's just a platform for him to share what's already going on in his life. Like it's just another means of communication. And so, yeah, I think that's really good. I think the more we think about it, young adults are influencers, probably bigger than any generation in the past, right? Yeah. Because we are so connected. Even those people who aren't on social media have some form of social connection, whether it's like, Snapchat or Be Real or you name it, right? Even if they're not like on the big Instagram or TikTok, whatever, like they have some kind of platform that they are speaking from. And I think now more than ever, like that generation, your generation, some of my generation, definitely the one behind, they want to make a difference. They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves, right? And I think social media is a perfect means to be able to do some of that. Like social media is a means to unleash the gospel like never before. And so I think this is a conversation that we need to have, that we need to remind them that, hey, your influence is important. Mm-hmm. It's here. It's right now. Your influence is not only the 3 or 4 people in your close circle, but it's the 10 to 20 that are in your larger circle. It's the several hundred that are in your social media circle. It's the, for some of those people, it's the thousands and thousands that follow you. And how are you using your platform? Right. Like, are you a Christian who is using your platform for Christ? Or are you an influencer who is using your platform for your own personal gain? And then every now and then I'm throwing in, a Jesus token. What are you actually using it for? Yeah. I love social media, and I think it's such a great tool. It's such a great, cheap, for most parts free tool that I can share the truths of the gospel often. I do have to be on guard, right? Because pride does want to creep in, and you do want to do some things that maybe will get more likes or get more whatever interactions. Right. But that's not the goal. Uh-huh. The goal is to preach Christ. The goal is to, the same person I am off the screen is the same person I am on the screen. And so for all the traps that social media can bring, there's also a ton of good that social media can bring.
Absolutely.
And so, it's just a great opportunity.
Yeah. And so I think going back to that podcast, JP talks about how there's a ton of positive aspects of having social media, of having a following, and he relates the word influencer to leader, right? I think those words are synonymous, and he would say the same. And it's really cool to think of it through that lens. And he even went as far as saying, like, on these social media platforms, you literally have followers, right?
That's right.
Leaders have followers. And so it's really cool. And he describes this way of being an influencer, being a leader. And there's multiple ways to do it, right? Like, you don't have to necessarily every day, every post be sharing scripture directly from the gospel. There's ways to do it where you're just being excellent in your work, and you're letting people know that you are a Christian, right? And then at the end of the day, you're going to point people to Christ. So specifically for me, that I know my niche, my area of influence is in the world of photo and video, because that's what I do, right? That's what I know the most of. And so my thought is, like, how can I be as excellent and live that Colossians 3:23 life and work as if I'm not working for men, but for God? And how do I show that to the world? And then how do I, in goal, point them back to Christ, point them back to the gospel? And for me, that's not going to look like sharing scripture every day, but there will be for sure scripture thrown in there. And I think the way that I would like to do it is have a lot of ties to scripture, or to showing the love of Christ to people, and I think that's really cool, because I think God's creative, man. Like, God has so many ways of doing things, and it's not one way or no way. There's so many different avenues you can take with this. And it's very similar to like the music episode we talked about, right? Where, like, there's a lot of artists that aren't necessarily referring to scripture, but it's still Christian artists doing work for the Lord. They're doing it with excellence. They're doing outstanding work, and it's pointing people at the end of the day back to Jesus, which is super cool.
I think, like, even in that, like what you're talking about, had some verses pulled, like some thoughts pulled for this episode. In 1 Peter 3:15 is talking about honoring Christ, keeping him holy, and being prepared to defend when people ask you, why do you have hope? Like, why? Yeah. Like, what is this reason that you have this different life coming out of you? And I think, like, what you're talking about is the perfect way to do that, right? Social media is a means to do that. Like, people will notice there's something different about you. Be prepared to share. Oh, well, it's Christ in me that makes me different, right? Yeah. I think as we kind of wrap up this thought about influencing, I think just a couple of things to remember. Your heart is deceitful above all things.
Yep.
So don't just listen to your heart. That's the biggest lie. Don't listen to your heart. Your heart is deceitful. Surround yourself with people who can talk to you frankly, who are looking out for your best intentions, and who you actually listen to and respect, number one. Number two, we have influence, like all of us, whether you're on social media or not, whether you have 1,000 followers or 2 followers, you all have influence. So live a life that is worth following, right?
Yeah.
Follow me as I follow Christ, the words of Paul. Like, do the same thing on the screen, off the screen. Live a life that is people can see Jesus in. And then number 3, I think in the world of influence, do it for Christ. Like, I mean, if you're blessed with an amazing platform, do it for Christ. If you're blessed with the 2 or 3, live so intentionally doing it for Christ. Like, it doesn't matter how big or how small your influence goes. It matters with how well you live for Christ. And so, I think influencing, what a crazy world we live in. That's like a real job. Right? It's good.
And it's like a formal job now, which is crazy, it's really cool though, because
scripture based. You already were an influencer. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's scripture based. That is your job. Influence. Yeah. It's good.
Guard your heart.
Guard your heart. Creative corner. Guard your heart.
You go first.
Oh man. Okay. Oh, I had one and I don't remember.
Let me go.
Go. I'll think about it.
All right. So mine this week is, it's actually like these 2 people, Ty and Jules Morlett. I think they were worship pastors and worship creatives here in the Austin area for a larger church. And they decided that, like, we're more than that. This work, this job that we're doing is kind of harming our marriage. And so they decided to really do a deep dive, work on their marriage, and they healed a lot of wounds. And they've been putting on this marriage conference for the last couple of years that has helped hundreds of people in the Austin area and outside of these walls. I think they were able to go up to Alaska to do it. And it's a really cool, like, gospel-centered marriage conference that teaches you how to argue with your spouse, how to love your spouse, and just how to be a servant above all else and show them the love of Christ. And so it's a really cool thing they've done. And I think it's really cool that these creative people, these musicians, were able to use their creativity to help other people in a different way. And
that's good.
Yeah, I'll shout them out.
You know what? I'm going to shout out a podcast that's similar to ours. It's for young adults. They do a really good job. The Paper Room Podcast. It's from BT Church down in the Valley. I know a couple of those guys that are on the podcast. Man, they do just some great work. So if you enjoy our podcast and you want another podcast that's similar, they talk about different things. They talk about probably some of the same stuff, but they do a great job. And so I think even in that, like, right, we're not competing. Like, it's just, man, let's highlight people who do great work that talk about Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so shout out to those guys. So the Paper Room Podcast is another one that you can definitely check out. They do some good stuff. So there we go. It's the creative.
That's it, man. All right.
Creative piece.
See you later, influencers.
Peace out.
Follow me. Just kidding.